please.
That's very generous of you.
This is a new venture for me to come to invite people to come to the artist studios. But it's an opportunity for you to see where the artists are working, to just take a little time here to look at pieces in their places on this place. But the artwork of this is a brand new piece by Digby Veevers-Carter, and do you see the oak leaf theme here? Digby gave me this bowl when I announced that I wasn't going to be doing exhibitions anymore. I think that was the occasion.
Nice, I love you too.
Oh. And he just gave me one of these beautiful leaves from the new series. This is wonderful. This is just extraordinary.
Yeah, when I was about 6, I started carving chalk. We lived in England, and there was big chalk hills where the great white horses in the Salisbury Plains. So yeah, I started carving chalk, and I enjoyed it. Yeah, my mother's American. My grandfather, they had newspapers in New York Sun, and my grandfather was a writer. He wrote Life of Father, which is a very classical play originally that we turned into. So my grandma was very much into the literary scene and all that sort of stuff over here. After I left university in England, I came over here. My grandmother was ill, and she needed someone to look after her, and I moved to New York to do that. And I was selling my grandmother's house, and I was doing this sculpture. It was kind of a Brancusi thing of 2 figures kissing, and this woman walked in, real estate agent, called Golden Boggins. Would you believe that name? And she says, "That's beautiful, I want that, how much is it?" And I kind of never sold a sculpture before. I said, "Why don't you pay me $10 an hour?" She goes, "How long did it take?" I said, 40 hours, $400. Done. Just a piece of plaster I'd painted, and I delivered it, and it's been kind of downhill ever since, really.
Digby began his sculpting career carving stone, but later transitioned to modeling in wax, where he found greater artistic freedom, defining his own boundaries of form, rather than having them imposed upon him by the size and shape of a stone.
That owl is it's part of the leaf series. So I take oak leaves, dried, very dry oaks, and I'll dip them in wax, get a good coat of wax on it. So you have each piece is unique. And because you've got to make a mold of it, you can't just kind of throw it in. Otherwise, it'd be nice to have little bits of stuff sticking out all over the place. So you sculpt it, and that's why it's got these divots, comes out these points, etc. Because you're also thinking of the mold in the sculpture. First, you do the sculpture, and you're like, very pleased with myself and all sorts of stuff. But then you realize you've got to make a mold, because a piece like that, you probably want to make an edition of like 5 or something. Because there's a lot of sculpting time involved in it. So you think, okay, how is this going to pull apart from the mold? And that's about the limit of how far I allow the process to really involve the artwork. So that thing is sculpted in wax, actually. I like wax. It's I have a lot of wax in the foundry. It's free, and I don't like clay. But like the insects, you have to do those out of like an oil clay, because it's very precise work, and it takes a very long time.
His most recent work explores movements and details in nature. He is drawn into the magnificence locked in the seemingly simple aspects of life: an insect's exoskeleton, the stillness of an ancient tree, or the smoothness of an animal's skin. In 1998, he founded Somerset Foundry in Truro, Massachusetts, and relocated it to Bath, Maine in 2002.
I was working construction, and I took a course in foundry. And I was carving stone, limestone, and I was shelling already. And that's when I decided to build a foundry. But I did an apprenticeship with a great friend of mine. So I learnt basically in the trade. And I've done, I don't know how many sculptures now. I've cast thousands of sculptures. So I know the intricate ins and outs of it. As you get older in the foundry business, you know how to finish work, and you know the artists. I mean, most of the artists I've been casting for 20 years, some of them, and they're pretty good friends. And the ones that aren't got rid of, or they got rid of me. So it's quite symbiotic. It's a very close symbiotic relationship because we're taking their work through the original, and we're changing it into wax, and then we're changing it into bronze. We've got to finish the bronze.
The foundry has become a touchstone for sculptors in Maine, Greater New England, and beyond. The process begins by creating a wax reproduction of the artist's original work. The wax is then coated in a silica shell that, once fired, will become the vessel to hold the molten bronze.
So, as you can see, this is the, first we dip it straight into the cortical silica, which is this stuff. It's literally just, it's liquid glass with silica flowers in a suspended solution. And then we dip it in the sand. And literally this is a cat box thing. You hold it over and you cat box it, just like a cat would do in a little box. So we do the first 2 coats of this very fine sand, which gets the texture and the detail. And then we add 4 coats of this coarser sand. And this is just a refractory material. It stands incredible differences in temperature and shock.
This is what we're actually casting the metal into. So this hard shell we've built up around a wax copy, and then we put it in an oven and melt out the wax, hence the lost wax technique. And it's hollow. There's no wax or anything in there, just the hard hollow shell. And then the casting shed, which we'll show you, we flip these over, and with the molten metal, we'll pour that right into the pour cup, let it cool, and then this white and gray material we just chip off with a hammer. So that's a one-time use mold.
And we stack them in here. You can stack them pretty high. You can fit a lot of shells into this narrow space. And there's a hole in the bottom of this tray. So underneath it, we reclaim the wax. You get everything packed in, close it up, and you put it on full throttle. This is 400,000 BTU unit. And wax, so what you want to do with these shells, you don't want to heat them slowly because the wax expands. And as it expands, it'll just crack the shells. So you want to flash fire it. So you want to bring it up to about 1200, 1400 degrees. Boom. Real fast, I mean within a couple minutes. And literally you turn it off after about 45 minutes when you feel it's done. And I leave it in there overnight. I just let it, because it holds a lot of temperature. We dig out the sand, and it's wet sand. It's not wet, it's moist, so it packs. And when that's ready, and the metal's ready, we put them in, and we pack them in. And Pete runs the furnace.
So the furnace, this is our crucible here. This is what holds the metal when we melt it. And we've got our hoist over here, which we're able to pick up that bucket and lower it into the furnace here. And so we'll have this goes into the furnace, and then we'll slowly add the metal as it's heating up. Just in bronze ingots is how we buy it, and then we're also able to use all the reclaim, which is like the cut-off sprues and everything that we needed for the process, but isn't part of the sculpture. And then over the course of an hour and a half, we'll get this filled up with liquid metal, and when it reaches about 2025 degrees, we'll lift it out with the hoist, put it down in the cradle, and then if you want to just once we grab this, Digby runs the bullhorn side, and we're just able to come up, pick it up, full of metal, and then we'll go down the line and fill those shells up with the liquid metal. At which point we let them cool for, I don't know, a half hour. Then we can take them out of the sand. They're still very, very hot, hundreds of degrees. We'll let them sit overnight, and then we chip off the shell material.
Often working at the foundry with Digby is sculptor Peter Dransfield, whose beautifully expressive work reveals the attention to detail and sensitive mastery of patinas so many sculptors have come to rely on.
I was down in Gloucester, Mass, doing a big job, and we were working late nights, and next to this pond there was it was actually a log that it just kept catching my eye, and I kept thinking there was something over there in kind of that dog shape. So I explored that idea. My stuff, more than sketches on paper, I do a small maquette most of the time. See if I like it three-dimensionally. In wax, I like that material. It's hard enough to hold an edge, but it's also soft enough where you can move stuff around. The larger stuff, I build an armature underneath it, and then to get the final texture, I coat the whole thing in like a water-based clay, terracotta clay. My travels, I got hooked up with working in a foundry when I was in Montana and worked with those guys. They showed me the ropes. Really fell in love with the process and what you could do with the material. Just kind of freeing yourself from a lot of the limitations of other sculpture. Whether it's manipulating just steel or stone or anything, you can do a lot more with bronze. Just blacken out the metal, so you're gonna get to watch it change color here. It's potash. It comes out of the ground.
Well, I smell it.
Yeah, it's sulfur essentially. We use a Brillo pad to go back in and scrub it off, and the beauty of this is it really shows off all the texture, all the lines, all the detail, and just gives it a lot of depth. This is the one cold portion of the process that we're gonna do, and then we'll warm it up with a torch and apply the second chemical on this one, which is ferric nitrate, which is essentially iron and nitric acid. You go in and just apply your chemical. So you do that over the whole thing, and then you would seal it with the hot wax and buff it up, and it's ready for the market.
By casting and finishing their own work as well as the work of fellow artists, Digby and Peter have acquired a deep understanding of the craftsmanship required to invigorate the material, lend depth to the sculpture, and illuminate artistic expression. For these two artists, working in bronze is the perfect marriage of inspiration and craft.
I like to put stuff together. It's just my nature. It's these horrible units here, they're always busy. Engines ahead of airframes, as they say. And that's my hands in front of that.